stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day.
Hello, welcome back to Against the Grain. Thanks so much for joining me. This evening I have an incredible lady to introduce you to. Her name's Katie Asher. She's the mum of Houston, who appears in the telepathy tapes. The clip you just saw was taken from the trailer, Katie and Houston there, and indeed Dr. Diana Powell conducting some ESP tests with Houston. I have to say that, you know, since I've been interviewing these mums of these incredible children, everyone I speak to just moves me so deeply with how strong and resilient they are and how much they've had to endure, and what Katie's been through in her life and what she's come out of at the other end of it is nothing short of miraculous. In fact, she's written a book with Houston called The Book of Heaven. I haven't got a copy yet, but it's in my Amazon basket. That's something I'll be diving into as soon as I can. This lady has such an amazing energy about her, you're going to see now. So let's just dive in and hear firsthand the incredible story from Katie Asher. Hello, Katie. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
It's a real pleasure. I've been doing this sort of a marathon, really, and interviewing all you hero mums that have been doing this incredible work all over the years, the unsung heroes. I think, you know, they're going to have to call you. It's just so incredible. Now, you're Houston's mum. Is that, am I pronouncing that right? Is that Houston's mum? Yeah.
Perfect.
And so I did a little bit of digging on you today and found an article that was written in a magazine. I think there's a video, Mamma Mia. It says Katie was told her son would never speak. Have you seen that article? Yeah.
I haven't. I need to read this. So.
There we are. So you'll find this now. See, there'll be articles on you and you don't even know you've become famous. People are going to stop you in the street. Katie, you're the one.
And I'm so normal and
we're all normal.
Right. Someone asked me, they're like, what are your social media handles? I'm like, oh dear. I guess I should get on that, right?
Yeah, that's it. You need a marketing guru now, PR agent.
What will a teenager do? I've got those.
Of course, okay. They know much better. They know much better.
Good.
My daughter's not a teenager anymore, but she's my advisor. I say, yes or no. She goes, no, Dad, no, that one. So you were told your son, as it says in the article, early on that he was never speak, but you're a mother of 5, is that right?
That's correct.
And Houston is one of those, obviously. Yes. You left an abusive relationship, or are you a single mum with 5 children? Mm-hmm. See, there we go, unsung heroes straight away, and then one that's got autism with Houston, so that's a handful on its own. So
yes, and he was in my second. So
he was your second.
Yeah, so it was extremely intense, to say the least.
That's putting it mildly, isn't it? Yeah, yes. Of course. Now here we get to the bit where I want you to tell me the story. So you were working 3 jobs and you came home absolutely exhausted. Mm-hmm. Continue the story. What happened from there with you in Houston?
These 3 jobs I'm working, they're incredibly physically intense. I was getting up at 4:30 every morning to go train people for in a gym, and I was teaching yoga for different corporations and private lessons, and then I was also waiting tables at a local pizzeria. I was literally doing everything I could just to put these odds and ends of dollar bills together to make ends meet for my kids. And that night, it was a Wednesday night, and I had just come home from waiting tables. And I don't know if you've ever waited tables, but you're on your feet so much, you literally, by the time you stop, you're literally vibrating. You're just buzzing. And I laid down on the couch, buzzing. And I was so exhausted. And all I could think is, I just wanted to rest. I just wanted to sleep. And I couldn't even fully go to sleep. One of my sons was sitting there playing video games, of course, He's just mindlessly gaming. And Houston came downstairs and sat at my feet. And what people don't understand is that was in itself a miracle, because he never did that. He was always jumping up and down, making these huge guttural noises, flapping his hands, rocking back and forth. And I'm
Right.
not even doing it appropriately for
Sure.
how severe the movement was. And the only real language he had was scripting words from a Disney film. And so that was it. He might say pooter pooter for computer, which is he would fast forward and rewind Disney videos all day long. And that was it. I mean, this was our life. He was self-injurious, meaning he would bite himself severely. He had severe elopement. I don't know if anyone who's listening knows what that means. What that means is he's going to run away constantly. So everything has to be on severe lockdown. And what that does is it creates this environment where you actually never relax. You always have to be on guard and vigilant, hyper vigilant. So you always have to know where he is at every single second of the day. And it doesn't matter if it's 5 a.m. or 3 a.m., you still have to know where he's at and what's going on. And so that's the kind of environment that this happened in.
Wow.
And he comes down and he sits at my feet perfectly still, which now you understand how unusual that was. And I knew it was odd.
He was 17 now, right?
17. Yeah. And so when he made like these jumping and guttural noises, it's a 17-year-old body that's doing it. It's not a child. And he sat there perfectly still. And I knew that was odd, but I was so exhausted. I didn't even want to acknowledge it because I just wanted it to stay quiet. And he very intentionally, leaned over and very intentionally, just like you would to get someone's attention, like you would tug at the blanket, he reached over and he tugged at the blanket and at the same time said, "Mama." And I opened my eyes at the sound of his voice because I had never actually heard him use a normal voice. It wasn't like that high nasally sound or the low guttural. It was just a normal, beautiful young man's voice. And as he said, "Mama," I opened my eyes and he was looking directly into my eyes, which he had also never done.
Wow.
And he said, "I love you."
Oh my God.
And the way I explain it is I had waited 17 years to hear my son say, "Mama, I love you." And at the time, I was actually doing my yoga certification and they had insisted that we give an intention. And I was like rolling my eyes inwardly, like, oh, right. Yeah, what's my intention to be? And so I remember I'd said something very vague and non-committal. And then without meaning to, the truth came out. Like I couldn't even stop it. It just fell out of my mouth. And I said, "Oh, and I would like bad things to stop happening." And they actually challenged me. They said, "Well, why would you say that?" And I'm like, "Oh, no. I know how belief works, and you believe what you've experienced. That's what I've experienced. Why would I believe anything else?" And they challenged me again, and they said, good has just as much chance of happening as bad. And I really struggled to even embrace that as a possibility, much less a truth, right?
Wow.
And so they really just kept encouraging me. And so I remember I tried to say the word expect. I expect good things to happen. And I actually couldn't get the word expect out of my mouth. And I quickly substituted the word hope. And I said, "I hope good will happen." And the poor yoga teacher was so probably like, "Good grief, we've got a project here." So she started at work on me and she gave me a bunch of articles. And really what the articles were was to explain the power of thought. And so it was really about how everything that you see around you, like, for example, if you hold up like my glasses or anything, right? And she said, like, "What was this before it was this?" And most people go, "Oh, plastic or, oil or whatever it was, whatever the raw material was." And but actually it was an idea, it was a thought.
Okay.
So everything is first a thought before it becomes a thing. And this resonated with me on just a really like spiritual level. Like, it's true. Like, everything's a thought before it's a thing. And so I realized that like thought, spirit, like ethos creates matter, right?
Yeah.
I realized that. And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna somehow believe that something good's gonna happen, right? And then that's when Houston said those words.
Really?
That's when he said it, was when that tiny little shift
You
in
left
my
a little opening.
And so I was telling, I was sharing that story once with someone, and I said, well, I was given a choice. I could either believe what all the experts said, or I could believe in a miracle. And I chose to believe in this miracle, right? Because if you've waited 17 years to hear your son's voice and then he speaks to you and says, Mama, I love you, guess what? You're going to believe.
That's a miracle.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. I told this one person that, and they said, that's not a choice. That's a mandate. I was like, you're right. You know what? That is a mandate. So I chose to believe, and I chose to believe in a miracle. What I was not prepared for was how large the miracle was going to be. And I'm still wrestling with how extraordinary it is that, essentially that the maker of heaven and earth chose to reach down into our very low vibrational frequencies and interject his hand and his love and his purpose and just touch our lives. And I will never be the same because of it.
Fantastic, Katie. Fantastic. There's lots of reasons to suspect that, although we occupy this very tiny place in the universe, and we're this tiny speck of dust on top of this little tiny thing, ball of rock that's spinning around, that we're actually very big and special as well in the creation of all things. And it's when you get these sorts of experiences that you realize that we all are, and that's what opens all of this up to the interconnectedness of it all.
I think, that's actually the verse that the quote that I started our book off of with is by oh goodness, I need my glasses on. John Muir.
John Muir. Okay, don't know.
Oh, he is actually this incredible environmentalist from about the time of President Roosevelt, right? He was instrumental in bringing a lot of the national park systems, and really the first conservationist, a really profound conservationist in the United States, just wanting to retain the integrity and this natural wonder that we were given in this country, that God created, and just saw the development and wanted to make sure there was preservation.
Okay.
And what he said was, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And
that's the quote.
That's it. We are all connected, all of us.
We're all connected, yeah.
And all creation as well.
Exactly. And once we realize that, things will change fast, I think. Yes. I'm a big believer in compression and expansion, this mirror of the breath. You're a yoga teacher, right? So it's all about this breathing, this compression and expansion. And that when paradigm shifts happen, they usually happen very quickly because they've followed a long period of a sort of expansion. So the world has opened up, and it's, we've gone through these few thousand years of religion and how we try to relate to ourselves and the world we live in through what the church teaches us, and then what science has come along and said, well, a lot of that is nonsense, and you need empirical evidence, and it's led to atheism, and it's led to materialism, and it's led to all sorts of situations of where we are now, which has left us very disconnected from each other, where there's lots of mistrust, there's lots of deception, there's all the things which are anti-cooperation, they're anti-kindness, and that's what's one of the things that have come out of the telepathy tapes for me, is that this consistent message that all these individuals have to say, you can't lie. You can't do what we do if you lie. We need to bring back kindness. We need to bring the heart's intelligence back. And so that's what's so powerful for me amongst all of this.
What's interesting is Houston, I showed him this video once, and I was actually trying to show him how cool the 80s were. The
80s were the best.
Like, that's what we need to go back to the 80s. Like, not back to the future, back to the 80s. That's what we all need. So anyway, so it's this video of these two guys, and they're like gray, beards, pot bellies, and they're out in their driveway, and it's like, really simple, right? No one's fancy or anything. And somebody plays this song from 1989, and these two guys jump up and they go into the dance that they did for their 1989 homecoming. And it is extraordinary, right? It's like everything that was awesome about the 80s. And so I showed this video to Houston, and I'm thinking he's going to say something about the dancing, how great that was, or something like that. And instead, he says, "This shows what autistics already know." I'm like, oh, great. What am I learning today? I don't even know what lesson I'm on, honestly. So he said, memories are in muscles. Prayers are held in the heart. Knowledge is held in the mind. The mind likes to think it's the ruler of them all, but really these are three separate rulers in one body. And I was like, that's extraordinary. And it actually led to a lot of my understanding of kind of some of these other things that are a part of their experience, and that is like how we are connected to each other, even to our spirit. For how is our body connected to our spirit?
Yeah,
and this recognition that we are mind, body, and spirit, which is critical. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that materialism does, is it tries to pretend we are a body and a mind, and we don't have a spirit.
Yep. And
that's like, so essentially, if you take out the spirit, you take out everything that's eternal, right? Because the mind and the body both decompose.
Yep.
But the spirit's the only eternal part. So you can see why. Then, of course, if you take out that, then you have to, connect yourself to everything that's material, right? Greed, money, power.
That's it.
Yeah. But in that whole realization, there's this incredible video, and I talk about it in our story. But there's this video of this woman who was the prima ballerina of the New York City Ballet. And she has Alzheimer's now, but she was this, New York City prima ballerina in 1965, I think was the year. Mm-hmm. And they put these headphones on her and start playing the music of Swan Lake. And she's in her wheelchair, hunched over. She doesn't have any recollection of who she is. And the corner, they have the video of her performing Swan Lake down in the corner. As the music plays, her body suddenly starts performing Swan Lake in her wheelchair. Then she remembers who she is.
Really?
And it's this, so there's something really eternal about memory, and that it's this, and the memory isn't this, while it does have, like, maybe the files, or, we have, a connection in the filing system in our brain, but the actual memories themselves are in the body and through the senses. And so those create like memory fields. And there's just, I don't know, there's just so much more that we have yet to discover.
That's really interesting. I mean, mm-hmm. So I like, there's a quote I heard recently that said, "We are storied organisms."
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't that great?
It is.
Because before writing, before our memories were conscripted to what's in books so that we learned to go and look things up, we told stories to pass down knowledge that was accumulated. And so, for example, the Aborigines, 60,000 years without writing systems, they had to learn to pass down the accumulated wisdom and knowledge that they'd learned to their descendants so that they could survive, right?
Yes.
And when I first heard about song lines, do you know about the song lines, the Aboriginal song lines? Okay, so when an Aboriginal, they go on this walkabout, it's like a rite of passage, right?
Right.
So they've got a loincloth and a stick, right? And you think, well, there's no 7-Eleven out there in the outback, right? But they survive. They just march off out there and they see, how did they survive, right? And how do they know how to get about? Because it's just like this huge, vast wilderness, right?
Right.
So they learn these songs from their grandmothers, and the songs are maps that animate the landscape. So the hills will have names, and they'll say in dream time, before the creation of the world, before the material reality solidified, everything was like a dream. And just like in dreams, everything's malleable. So there are all these characters, they've got like Wallaby Man and Kangaroo Man and Lizard Man and all these different names, right? And they all had all these adventures together. These are the stories. And then when the material reality kind of solidified and crystallized for the physical reality to, take place, these kangaroo men, they morphed into hills and mountains. And if the lizard man has sort of like taken a leak over there, in the story, as you're singing the song, you're stepping. The stepping is the cadence of the music.
Right.
The song you're singing will then tell you where you are. So as you're at the part of the song and you look to your right and that hill there, that's where you're going to get water from. That's where you're going to get food from. So that's how they survive, by these song lines, right? So the memory was in the songs. It was walked as they walked to keep the cadence, to keep the timing. And then we know that it's connected to the cadence of the timing because they were put on the back of a pickup truck, some of these Aboriginals. And when they were driving faster, they were singing the song faster. Because the truck was going faster, right, yeah. Wow. They said they call it...
There's an actual neurological term for that.
What's that?
It's called entrainment.
Entrainment, yes.
Yes. I'll give you the actual definition so I don't mess it up. Someone doesn't say that lady doesn't know anything she's talking about.
I'm sure you do. No one's going to say that.
It says so entrainment is the body naturally syncs to an outside rhythmic source.
Right.
Which makes sense. Everything's frequency, everything's energy, everything's alive, everything's moving.
Yeah.
And that's what's so interesting about what Einstein did was the theory of relativity, while it has incredible impacts on all parts of our understanding of nature and physics, what's really incredible is it says that energy and matter are really the same thing, measured in different ways. Huh? And we, I think that most people still don't recognize that, and that's the disconnection, and that's what I hope is going to come from this, is that we recognize that energy and matter are actually the same thing. Just measured in different ways. Yeah.
I think, I've spent a lifetime, trying to understand what chi is. My path has been this sort of martial arts that went from sort of judo and stuff when I was a kid, and it's been the internal arts for the last almost 30 years. It's a mystery, but the more I get to deal with this stuff, the more I think that chi is really about this mysterious consciousness that we're talking about, this divine essence, right? And so I'm reading this book at the moment where they lay out this whole, material paradigm versus consciousness. They call it the hard problem of consciousness. Mm-hmm. So we're told by the materialists that we're nothing more than dead stardust. And on top of that dead stardust is some chemistry, which is a bit complex. Then there's biology, and they ignore some of the questions in biology, the ones that talk about sort of life, because they don't really know how. And then on top of all of that is this consciousness bit that's just sort of sprung out randomly from all of these processes, right? They don't know the answers to how consciousness just randomly comes out of all of this sort of Frankenstein dead matter that's had an electric shock. But they assure us that they will find the answers soon. We just need to believe that that's the answer already.
It's interesting that they ask us to take them at faith.
Yes. Isn't it?
Yes, it is. And it makes far more sense that that everything comes from spirit than that everything comes from matter.
Exactly. Consciousness is the base of it.
Yes.
And then it comes up. And Joe Rogan had a guest. I talked to Caroline about this yesterday, the day before yesterday, that Joe Rogan had a guest recently who says that, and I go along with it, it's called the anthropic principle. So it says like, we are co-participating in reality, because reality needs information. When it was just pure consciousness, it needed to sort of to understand itself and grow and evolve to get more information. So it creates us as sort of individuated aspects of this oneness, because in our lifetimes, the myriad of all of us, the ideas and the things that we will come up with, it can't do on its own. And it's all fed back into this information system that it seems these children can access.
I think I watched, is it Thomas?
Tom Campbell.
Yeah, okay, Tom Campbell, yes. I did watch, I didn't watch the entire interview, but I did watch a good bit of it. And I thought that, like, it definitely, I thought there were some elements, though, that were missing from his theory.
What do you think was missing?
Well, that really, that first of all, there's the issue of the nefarious forces that are out there that are very much in existence. So they really didn't have an accounting for that. And,
no.
And really that, I mean, even if it's just the two binary, right, that starts it all, where did those come from? I mean, like, just...
Oh, yeah. It doesn't solve the chicken and the egg problem,
it
that's
doesn't.
for sure.
No. And then I think that it's still an effort for us to try to understand something, try to put something eternal, omnipotent, infinite into a construct that we can kind of grasp. And that's not to say there's not, I mean, we certainly are all part of this, collective, attribution to the one who made us, for sure. But I thought there were some elements that weren't included in his, in his theory. But he's a brilliant man, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I never think that anybody's got all the answers, and run from anybody that tells you they have as fast as you can, right? But there were some interesting things in that. I don't know if he's got any answers for the nefarious sort of. I mean, one of the things I'm interested in is in my last film. Have you heard of the daemonic reality?
I have not. Okay, that's not spelled the way I think it is. So let me.
Yeah. So the spelling of this comes from Plato.
Fantastic. That's fantastic, and it's a field guide to the
other world.
The other world. I love it.
The notion of a daemonic reality comes from Plato.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned everything's an idea when you picked up the glasses earlier. That's Platonic, right?
Yes.
The perfect realm of ideas. So a table is a table, but somewhere there's a perfect idea of a table.
Mm-hmm.
This is Platonic, yeah?
Okay.
And a lot of philosophy came from that kind of notion that led right up to Descartes, and Descartes was the ultimate materialist, right?
Yes.
He said, I think, therefore I am. Nothing in the world, it's all a distraction. I just need to go back into myself without any distractions and simply think about the answers to it, right?
And I always thought that was so odd, because really it's I am, therefore I think.
Right. So this is it.
Yeah.
So Martin Heidegger came along some years later, I think 1930, and wrote Being in Time. I think it's Being in Time, and said, if you want to understand the idea of a pair of glasses, put them on.
Yeah. Shocking, right?
Right. And you go, oh, okay. So that's where this philosophy of connecting with objects in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and so one of the things that sort of is connected to the sort of internal martial arts to get this body, to get this memory, is to use a stick, because the stick feeds back to give you a sense of where you are in time and space.
That is so funny that you say that, because Houston was always obsessed with holding sticks.
Right.
Obsessed with it. Like, he had to have sticks. And it was like, if he didn't have sticks, he didn't know where he was.
Right.
And the way I try to explain to other people who might just see his body and not understand how the human being, the spirit inside this body that can appear to be so disconnected from itself. As I say, he lives more in his etheric body, his spiritual body,
yes,
than his physical body.
Yes.
And this engagement with physicality, with matter, allows him to have it almost like a bridge to that material world.
Right.
Yes.
So it's like when I interviewed Manisha the other night, Akil's mum, she said, you know, he first said, my mind cannot see my body.
Yeah. And that's true. It's true.
And so that's what you just described, isn't it? They're and Diane would probably put it in, you know, they're sort of in this left brain or right brain. I get confused with which side. It's the right brain, isn't it? So the left side.
Yes, always opposite.
Yeah,
Yes, I'm always
opposite.
like trying, like, wait, which one? You're okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I usually say the wrong one. But regardless of those sorts of things, it's this disembodied, in a way, consciousness, and that gives them these abilities that we don't have in some ways because of this embodiment.
Yes.
But the stimming, you know, I worked as a volunteer in a hospital full of I was an occupational therapy department. When I was 17, I was a volunteer for 6 months. Right, it was a tremendous experience, and I didn't know anything about, you know, any of that. And there were a mixture of different ranges of disabilities. Some of them self-harming. Some of them we used to pick them up and take them cookery lessons or swimming and different things. But when I saw some of them like twisting pieces of paper or, you know, doing the same repetitive rituals, touching their feet and touching their shoes and stuff. And the occupational therapist was explaining to me what they knew then. This was in the 80s, the great 80s. I think that's what we're talking about, right? So this when they touch something and connect with something, they can then feel their body and be more embodied with their consciousness. Would you say that's a...
Well, I would say it's more embodied to their body. So, more connected to their body, this is the interesting part, is that, so whenever you're taking in, you know, everybody's thoughts and everyone's feeling, and everything's energy, right? So thought is energy, right? And, you know, that's what belief and doubt, those are both energy. They're very, very powerful energies, because that's where we're actually creating, you know, the matter is with our beliefs or our doubts. So whenever you've got this existence where you're taking in everyone's thoughts and everyone's emotions, that's way too much sensory information, right? And what that does, especially if it's negative, you know, thought and negative information, is it triggers, you know, the amygdala, it triggers the limbic system, which what that does, it puts you into, you know, fight, freeze, flight, you know, all those different mechanisms, which cut off your access to the frontal lobe, which is where intentional motor is processed. Right. So these connections, these desperate desires to connect to matter and to have a ritual and things like that, are actually ways for them to calm themselves. They're doing their best with these, like, you know, it's basically all these like tools that they have come upon themselves in order to calm their own bodies and to essentially regulate, you know, their own internal mechanisms so that they can have control. And the real issue with everything materialistic in the approach and how these individuals, these non-speakers, have been treated, is they treat everything as if they have the exact same behavioral control over their body that we do.
Yes.
Everything is, you're behaving this way because it's intentional. They view everything as like intentional because they assume that the person has physical control without doing any of the recognition to understand that their physiology is completely different than ours. Completely. Like, they are missing the connection to their motor and their motor planning. And yet they are judged, their intelligence is judged by the very thing that they lack. It's like asking, judging a blind person's intelligence based on their ability to read the printed word.
That's a really good analogy. That is how ridiculous it is, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And they are so, so the whole thing about behaviorism, I don't know, like this all behaviorism came from materialism, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of an offshoot of materialism. And it actually has some really disturbing history. It's actually rooted in like the early 1920s with a lot of the eugenics. And this is where the intelligence tests came in. And they went to essentially judge their intelligence, identify who the undesirables were so that they could then essentially prevent them from breeding. Yes, this was their their final solution, which Hitler took to an extreme.
Yeah.
And it's the fact that we're still using these intelligence tests today is horrific. I mean, it's a severe ethical violation that these individuals are having all their rights determined by their disability, by the very fact that they don't have motor control.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And that still goes on right to now.
Today.
Which leads me into this, I'll jump forward a little bit then. Episode 8, when it talks about the gatekeepers of these people that want to prevent what's clearly the spelling to communicate. And you did a different one, didn't you? What's it called?
Oh, no,
rapid,
I did.
Rapid prompting method. Is that the same thing?
It's the same thing.
Same thing.
I mean, it has its roots. And I did, like, the actual program I did was spelling to communicate, but I give Soma the credit for, which is rapid prompting method. I give her the credit because she is the one who realized that you could actually prompt motor, that you could actually start coaching motor. And then they could, through this coaching of motor, develop, independent motor. And so she was the one who came up with that. So she absolutely deserves the credit.
Deserves the credit, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is, because there seems to be, do you think it's basically mostly on a misconception of what people think it is? Because it seems that the criticism is that you're doing it, right? Or the helper's doing it, but you're just really coaching them until they can do it on their own. Well, that's like teaching a regular kid to ride a bike. That's
exactly right. And it's like, okay, it's this idea that, like, imagine like how you teach kids to play baseball, right? You put a bat on a tee and you go behind them and you're literally hand over hand.
Absolutely, yeah.
Coaching their motor. And they're basically, so it's the idea that we're never going to teach anyone how to do anything. We're going to expect them to do it at a professional level, completely independently from the very beginning. And that's the only thing that we're going to equate as valid. Oh, great. Well, okay. And it's also this like complete, unrecognition of like the fact that all speech is motor, all of it, moving your hand is motor. What makes something, your own is the intention, the thought. The thought is what's individual.
Yeah.
And, what's so difficult with these guys when they, these double-blind placebo, all their different little...
Yeah.
Well, first of all, there's no such thing as a double-blind with these kids because they can hear everything. So there is no... I'm like, what do you do when someone's getting all the answers at once? Like, which one do you want me to use? I'm not sure. But like their systems are overloaded. And then they're also a double-blind test means that the person administering the test also doesn't know the answer.
Yeah.
And, the problem with, these tests is they're designed by behaviorists who want to, protect their behaviorism industry, which, by the way, is worth $7.6 billion worldwide.
See, you have to follow the money, don't you?
Oh, we do. And then Asha, who, has board members from the ABA industry on their board, which is $174 million. That's a whole nother, So, and that's a nonprofit, by the way.
A nonprofit, yeah.
And that, speech pathologists, they go to a university, they get their master's, they go into practice, but the only way they can actually practice is with this license, because that's the only thing that the insurance companies will pay if you have, these CCs, from ASHA. And different countries have a different organization. So that's just the United States. I don't want to speak for the others. So
yeah,
I'm sure it's just as
I've got Jess, the teacher Jess Curzon, ASHA's she's coming next week.
Oh, wonderful.
Or the week after. Yeah, she's coming on. So I'll ask her how it works in the UK.
Yes, and I'm not sure what the speech organization is there. I think in Australia it's like AASC or IAASC, something like that.
Right.
So there's several of these organizations, and it's really sad how intentional they are at preventing speech, which is the entire purpose of their organization, is to create communication. Here they are preventing.
I mean, you hear these stories so many times, and it gets people labelled as conspiracy theorists, don't it? And you say, like, well, hang on a minute. What? We had a post office scandal here recently, right?
Can you hold on one second?
Yeah,
I actually did hear Houston open a door.
Go for it.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's no worries.
I was right. He went to get Cokes, which he's not supposed to have. So,
Does he get really hyped up if he drinks them?
sorry,
Does he get really hyped up if he drinks them?
he does.
Yeah.
So, I was like, I don't think my other son's home. And I heard the door open. I was like, uh-oh.
Amazing. You heard that over the headphones. There you go.
Well, it's because like I'm literally
You're
wired
for it. Yeah.
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 So you know the sounds. You know. In fact, when and this is one I know really well, but when John Paul passed that day, what Libby heard was silence.
Wow.
And that's terrifying.
Yeah. I just heard something then. I just heard something then, like a door going or something.
Well, it wasn't a door. It was him. It was him making noise. But
It's making noise. So yeah, we were on the whole gatekeeper thing.
The post office scandal.
The post office scandal. You know about it, right? So
Yes.
what's astounding about all of that is the lengths that all the people who knew that were within the post office and were within this company that created this accounting software or whatever, they knew that it was their software, and yet they were prepared to let people commit suicide, to go to jail for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And so you just wonder what sort of psychology would go behind that. But then you look at this. Oh, we've got these children that have been written off as they'll never speak. There's nobody there. Oh, we found a way where they can communicate. Oh, and when they communicate, all this stuff starts happening. No, we don't recognize it. We don't do it, and go out of their way.
Yes.
That's a
it's
scandal,
not just to
isn't
go
it?
out of their way. I mean, the amount of fraud that they have, purposed in research.
Can you give me an example?
So, essentially, like this was, I believe, with the Australian one. Arthur Golden actually wrote about it. He might be someone really good to talk to about that because he is. In fact, I'll let him do the talking about that because
well, give me the highlights.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so basically, they have been trying to, hide this reality about their ability to hear thoughts for it's really probably for decades before we found out about it in the States, which was in the 90s. Okay, and I think about it. About the time that all came out was about the time my son was born. Okay. And so I have to learn this for myself, 21 years later. And they've known about it decades. And the amount of people that have been, just denied every single right that they have, denied of an education, denied of a voice, many institutionalized. And that doesn't even get into the number of people that have, that have died, that have committed suicide, or in horrific cases, killed their child and themselves because they were in so much despair and they had no hope. And
wow.
And all the institutions, all the experts, what they give you, what they diagnose you with is there is no hope. You have no hope. There is no hope. There is nothing you can do. Go. That's your life. That's the life sentence we're giving you. Write it on a little prescription. And then you're supposed to go live. And then the reality of what you're living with are these individuals whose bodies are so dysregulated, partly because they're experiencing so much and not able to explain, not able to tell you what's really going on.
Right.
But you were talking about the research, but one of them was essentially this declaration that these studies prove that there's no empirical evidence and that it's the authorship of these words is the facilitator, not the individual who can't speak. At the same time that they're requesting for other people to peer review it. So it was like we're making the declaration while we're also asking people to jump on board, which was certainly by any standards. And then the whole idea that there's only one experimental design that's valid, that's a completely inerrant idea. Like, for example, there are some experimental designs that prove quantum mechanics. There are other experimental designs that don't. Does that mean quantum mechanics isn't true? So
right.
the experimental design is extremely important.
Of course.
And then the other thing is they keep going, the amount of press they have, like paid press that they have to keep saying the same story,
Right.
even though there's hundreds that
Right.
prove that these guys are the authorship, do have authorship. But really, if you recognize that these individuals have their own authorship, have their own mind, and they just are incredibly motor challenged, but they actually have this awareness and proof that we are more than matter, well, that disrupts everything.
I wanted to talk about stones and crystals. You mentioned the place that so the lovely story about him coming home and putting all the rocks together and sort of clearing these thoughts. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Well, okay, so I had what had happened was Houston's like, you know, he's communicating now. He's experiencing, or he's telling me about these, you know, supernatural experiences and knowledge, and I'm in such a place of despair and doubt that I really can't be happy. I couldn't experience the joy of this. Here I was, like, surrounded by this miracle, and there was no doubt, like, this is a miracle, and I'm seeing the supernatural right in front of me. It's obviously real.
Just tell me now, like, so were we talking about when you're talking about you're seeing this miracle in front of you? What one are we talking about?
The fact that Houston can hear my thoughts. That
because I haven't sort of covered that. So we've gone off on all these tangents, and my fault. I blame myself.
Okay.
Just go back a bit for the viewers that are watching.
Sure.
Yeah, when did you first then start to realize the telepathy thing?
Yes, we did skip that, didn't we?
We did. Yeah. We've been putting the world to rights too much. That's my fault. Sorry.
There's so much to cover.
I know.
So much to change in the world.
Yeah.
So the way that so Houston first began spelling, the very first thing. So I found out about spelling. Somebody had told me about it. I thought to myself, maybe that could work, but I think my son's probably not as challenged as your son. So, but there was this little glimmer, like maybe, but I'm not sure, right? Then we ran into an old friend whose body was very challenged, like Houston's, and he's sitting there spelling all this stuff out, answering every question I had, and I said, I can tell you're smiling so much. You have something to say to me. What do you want to say? And he said, and he just went on this whole thing. It is, Houston needs a voice. We all do. Don't let the fact that time and money, or don't let time or money or the fact that you've tried a zillion interventions that failed deter you. This is the real deal. It works. It's not a cure. It's a chance for us to be known. We need the same chance that everyone else gets to be known effortlessly. Like the rest of us, we get to be known effortlessly without any effort. And here they are struggling to move one finger to one letter just to experience being known.
Wow.
Right? And so I was like, jaw on the floor. Well, clearly I have to go do this now. And so I did. And Houston, the first coaching lesson was with this coach, and he's jumping up and down, making all this noise. I'm like, Houston, you can't even hear what she's saying. She was introducing herself, telling where we are, normal introduction. And she turned to me and she goes, oh, he can hear everything we're saying. And I was like, what? Like, it didn't even compute to me. So he sits down beside her. She holds up a letterboard, gives him a pencil, and says, Houston, what's my name? Mind you, he had been like making these booming noises. I didn't even hardly hear her name. And he sat there and goes, J, and then spells out her name. I'm like, then she goes, where are we? And then he spelled out the name of the school that we were at. And again, I was like,
wow,
what? Then she sat down with him and did the lesson on Edward Shackleton, who was the first explorer to the Antarctic.
Yeah.
And he answers every single question. And I'm like, what is happening? Right? I'm like, how do you learn to spell? And she looks at me like, as if it's the most obvious question or answer in the world. She goes, language is everywhere. And this is actually very important, this particular point, because this is something that behaviorists, in fact, those who try to deny spelling. They're very insistent on this, that the only way you can know language is if it's been decoded for you, as if someone has sat there and systematically decoded language. So what they're saying is that the measure of a person's comprehension is their ability to repeat it back to you, that's the only thing they've decoded is what they're able to essentially, with speech, speak back to you.
With motor skills.
With motor, right. So, and the idea that that we are actually innately wired for language is very important. People need to understand this. We all are. We all see it everywhere, right? We're all wired for language. And Noam Chomsky was actually the first one to go after this back in 1958. And he wrote a scathing review of Skinner's book on verbal behavior, where he made that exact point, where everyone's wired for language. And unfortunately, the educational system
they want Skinner.
ignored.
This B.F. Skinner. Let's condition them. They must obey.
Yes, they must obey. They are animals and they will obey. We are not created in the image of God with power. No, we are animals. Yes,
exactly.
So anyway, so I'm kind of, I'm experiencing that, oh my goodness, my son understands, he comprehends. And I don't understand fully yet what he comprehends. I do my little lessons. He gets, it's painstaking at first. He's like, we're working on the 3 stencils, and he's like, just like that to get to one letter, because he has such little motor control. We keep progressing. We get to the 26 letter board, but I don't know how to transition from the 3 boards to the 1 board. So I went to my friend's house and I'm like, can you help me? And so she did this lesson on the history of the t-shirt, and she kind of went back and forth from the 3 boards to the 1 board. And the last question was, if you could put any slogan on a t-shirt, what would it be? And he spelled IMINHERE. I am in here. And of course, it was like literally like the bomb went off. And everything I thought was true was not true anymore. Everything.
Wow.
And I was like, what's even possible now? So that was like the first thing. So then I'm voracious, right? I want to know him. I'm like, I have to know him. And so he called me a beast, by the way.
Did he? He called you a beast?
He was like, with making him spell, he said, you were a beast. And I was. I mean, that's how, like, I had to know my son.
You're going to do this. Yeah.
And so then I'm like, I ran out of lessons really fast because I was so intent on and so they told me, they're like, well, just use anything. Use anything. Use this day in history or biography.com. Like, it doesn't matter. Just use anything. So I'm like, okay. And I love history. So I'm like doing history, this day in history. And so I would find that whatever happened in history wasn't enough. So I would just expand on like what I already knew. And every question I asked, he already knew the answer to. And I'm like, what is going on, right? How does he know all this? Then he starts, like literally, I was like, let's do the Declaration of Independence. And he starts spelling out more than I know, way more than I know. And I'm like, where is this knowledge coming from? Like, where is it? And so this led to this whole confrontation where I'm like, okay, how do you know so much? Where's this coming from? Like, I don't get it. And he said, I'm special. And I'm like a mom, like, of course.
And what year, how old was he now?
He's 21, almost 22 years old. 20. And he says, imagine being trapped in your body for 2 decades. And this is the first time you're getting to be known. 2 decades of thought and feeling and desire and mind and heart lost to the world that the world doesn't even know or care about. And that's why I was so like voracious trying to get to know him. I knew that when he said, I'm in here, I knew there was something magnificent that he was talking about. And I had to know that spirit, that soul. And so when he said, I'm special. And I'm like, of course you are, like
of course you are, darling.
And he says, I can hear thoughts. And I didn't believe him. And I said, asked him if he was lying. That was me. I did that. And because that's how we're taught. We are taught to distrust. If somebody says something extraordinary, then you go, prove it. It's not, I believe you, I trust you, I can only imagine what that must be like. No, it's immediately, show me. Because we've been taught that the only thing that's true is what you can prove to people.
True.
If somebody says something, extraordinary, then you go, where's the sleight of hand? Where's the lie? And
I don't know what you're doing, but you're doing something there.
yes,
It can't be
there's
real.
Yeah. And so he says, I can hear thoughts. And I'm like asking, he's like, you don't get the kind of gifts I have if you lie. And I
remember that.
Yeah, I was like humbled. Clearly, here's my son communicating to me. And what do I say? Are you lying? Right? And so I had to, take a step back for a minute there. And so I'd start doing my own little test right there on the bed. Like every single thing I ask. Then I am like, what am I thinking? And he says what I'm thinking. Then I start asking him the question in my head without even speaking the words to the question. And he answers the question on the board. And I was like, okay, this is way more than I can even fathom. Then I had our friend come in and I said, just keep one thought in your brain. Don't think any other thought, just one thought. I'm like, okay, Houston, what's he thinking? And he spells out, and I'm like, what he's thinking. I'm like, was that it? He was like, yeah, that was it. Like, then I asked my daughter, I called her. I'm like, Houston, can you hear thoughts? She goes, no, he can't, Mom. I'm like, he really can. No, I'm serious. And so she had her husband come up with something. It was Lord of the Rings, right? That was the phrase. She texted it to me. I'm looking at it, and he types it out. And I was just like, what is going on? And so that was just the beginning, right? Then he goes on to share with me, this is the supernatural part where it wasn't just the thought, because once he told me the whole thing about thoughts, that's when I suddenly remembered, oh my goodness, thoughts are things, right? And I was like, okay, so we think thoughts are just in our head, right? That they just stay up there and they're just these little meanderings in our own mind, and that's where they stay, but they don't. They're actual energy. And Dr. Carolyn Leaf, she's from Zimbabwe. She's brilliant, and she's a neuroscientist, and she talks about how there's actual different chemical structures based on the type of thought you have. Like a negative versus a positive thought actually have a different structure.
Wow.
Which goes to, and like the different structure of the thoughts actually forces different chemical releases in the brain and the body, which then
Which
you start
we know,
getting
really, don't we?
Yes, we know
Yeah.
this, right? And so this is where this whole mechanism between spirit and matter start happening, or in these like exchanges between our intent from our spirit then into the matter that that we all experience physically. But then when he started, basically, I'd say the first real experience of extraordinary supernatural happened whenever I was late for work, and I'm running late for work, and I'm like, do you have anything you want to say before I go? And he says, all the angels do is talk about you. And I'm like, I don't have time for this.
Too busy for angels.
Busy for angels. Angels is not going to make me okay for being late. Like, they are not going to accept that as a valid excuse.
Can I get a note from the angel to say?
I'm like, anyway, within 3 minutes, I was hit head on by a car. I hit a second time, rolled 1.5 times, and literally within minutes, with like my very I put my hand down and it's on gravel, and I'm like, what on earth just even happened? And the weird thing was when I was when the whole thing was happening, it was slow-mo, even though it was like fast and fast. It was slow and fast at the same time.
Yeah.
But I remember being pushed back in the opposite direction than the car was going. And I remember that very vividly, as if, and I could tell it was like against physics. You know what I mean? Like there was something very strange. So I'm discombobulated and everything. And about motor, right? my foot was stuck under the pedal in the car.
Uh-huh.
And I remember they were the EMTs, they were like, you need to pull yourself out. You've got to get your foot out. And I remember looking at my foot and seeing where it was and saying, I can't. And they said, can you move your foot at all? And I'm like, I think so, but I can't get it out. And they had to sit there and tell me what to do. And this is a great example of whenever you're under trauma and stress and anxiety, how you can't motor plan. And this is what they're under all the time, is this intense anxiety, and they can't motor plan.
Right.
Yeah. So I get to the hospital and everything else. They contact my daughter. She's got Houston. She comes to the hospital, and he's sitting there just like totally chill. And she's freaking out, right?
He's sitting there totally chilled.
She turns to him and she goes, aren't you worried? Again, that's what we've been taught to do, right? Is worry. You must worry. And he spells, calm down. She's fine. And she suddenly realized, you knew. And he said, don't be mad. It had to happen. And I was like, what on earth? And so later on, I'm like, how much do you know? How much do you know? Clearly you knew. How much more do you know? And I wanted to know about heaven, right? Like, have you seen what's going on? I don't even know if I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I ask? Do it? And I will tell you that there was always this kind of like measured response with him. He was like, how much is she ready to hear? And I feel that a lot with these guys.
You felt that.
I did. And I do think they only share with us what they think
what we can handle.
And I think that's why more is being shared now, because they are like, okay, they can handle. But I think the more we collectively turn our hearts to the right place, that they will be able to share more, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, so he starts sharing all these incredible things. And what was really remarkable was he starts describing passages out of the Bible that he'd never read. And I'm like, how do you know that? And mind you, his spiritual upbringing was like they had a special needs class in the basement of the church where they played Disney videos or VeggieTale videos, and that was it. There was no instruction.
There was no scripture. Yeah.
Yes. So for him to sit there and it wasn't just once, it wasn't just one passage, it was over and over and over, and things that really expanded my understanding of scripture and verses that I had never really even noticed before, he's bringing up. I'm like, I didn't even know that verse was in the Bible. And that happened over and over and over, to the point where you go, you had to have seen this. Like, you couldn't just be getting this from anywhere, because it wasn't even, frankly, it was anti-materialist type scripture. So he wouldn't have gotten it at church. It was really about the extraordinary activity and involvement of the spiritual realm within the physical realm, truly.
Right.
And so with the stones, right? So
hang on a second.
I
wanted to pick up on something Diane said about the difficulty that they're in, which would cause the anxiety of them being able to see the future, and what do they do with it?
Mm-hmm. That is very important. And when I asked Houston about it, he said, I'm like, how much can you see? And he said that the angels open windows in time to let me see. And he said, sometimes they let me see and sometimes they tell me. So I think that we have to get past this idea that there's only one way for them to know something. There are multiple ways for them to be given information. And I think that they are, they're each chosen to share certain things for a purpose.
Right.
And And one of the things that Houston describes, we have an incorrect assumption of time. That's part of the problem, is that materialism requires a linear, objectification of time. If you understand that all time's happening at the same time and that's not the limits of time, well, that messes up everything, right? Like, how do we understand our existence in a world where everything's happening at the same time?
It violently confronts how we experience it, because most of the time we just,
it's going along.
Yeah. Or we're either stationary and it's going past us, or we're moving through it, one or the other. But either way, it doesn't really work like that. But that's how we experience it.
Right. And that's okay. That's okay for us to experience it that way. But we also need to come to the humbling perspective that that's not the limits of it, that it's far greater than our comprehension of it. As is with most things, we can experience something, but that's not the full understanding of anything. And he said that in heaven that there are these gears that are too wonderful to explain, and that are time. And here's the other really fascinating part: is he always
describes them as gears.
Gears,
like cogs,
like gears,
like inside a Swiss watch or something.
That's exact. So thank you for getting to that, because this is what he says. He was always obsessed with cuckoo clocks, right? Like the old mechanical clocks and everything. I thought it was because he loved Pinocchio, right? And you know how the little cuckoo clocks at the beginning of Pinocchio?
Yeah.
I thought that was it, right? Well, it was just this like avid fascination with these mechanical clocks. And I didn't understand it. I'm just like, oh, good grief. Here we go. There's this antique store we would go to, and it had all these antique clocks. And I'm like, oh no, like walk really fast. Like, what he explained to me was that he can see these clocks on people, on things. Like, he can actually essentially, and so mechanical clocks work by gravity, right? That's how they actually function. They're a measure of gravity. And he can actually measure time because he's able to see this mechanism of these gears that are working, and they're essentially their interplay with gravity, which is very matter, right? Which is the whole matter. And if you go and you can do some research on this, you would be amazed how many people who have had someone die, how the clocks stop in their home, and even when someone is born into a home,
I've heard of
the
this.
clock will stop. And what I think it is it's this weight of a soul, the weight of a soul into a family or out of a family, coming in or out. It's just that small little weight of a soul that it has the ability to intersect with time. That entrance.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
From the matter to
I was
the
thinking
material
of the pendulum, because that's the measurement. It's a certain length, right, to measure time with gravity. Yeah. But that an individual coming in, a soul, the weight of a soul bending space, which bends time.
Yes.
Because space and time are connected. That's really, really interesting, Casey.
Yeah. So again, I think these are like incredible things that people should be investigating. This is like where science actually becomes curious again, right? Instead, no, we must be in a lab where these are we control everything, and these are our variables, and this is we are the other thing about the materialist perspective is it makes us the judge. It's all truth is only true if we say it's true. And we essentially put ourselves as God again.
Yeah, again. There's also this thing about third person and first person experience. It's like, I'll go back to a martial arts analogy. Bruce Lee famously said at the beginning of Enter the Dragon, don't think, feel. And this has come up in when you're teaching somebody to do something, right? Words are very limiting. They only count for 6% of the communication, body language and tone. A lot of Tai Chi teachers never used to say anything. They used to just get you to copy. And scientists couldn't understand until someone discovered so-called mirror neurons.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? But babies can, they smile and they can perform these complex operations because of mirror neurons, right? That we mirror each other.
Well, it's even more than that, because you ever notice, like when you hold a baby, that even without, like the baby can be asleep and you can have a thought, their eyes can be closed and they will mirror the expression of the thought.
Expression. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's emotion too. They're actually feeling the emotion.
Right. And which it comes back to this thing about the mind being a field, Rupert Sheldrake's work, right? Which seems, the evidence for that seems to be that there's something, there's enough, for at the very least, you think, for reasonable people to go, I think we need to revisit this and have another look.
I do. I think, and the whole thing about fields, I think, is incredibly important. And I think there are memory fields. I think there are electromagnetic fields, obviously, which we have proof of that. And HeartMath Institute, that they're amazing. They've done so much work actually showing the interconnectedness between different, like between a horse and a person.
Yes.
And showing how or between trees. They can actually measure the communication of trees and the actual physiological impact that one person's emotion can have on the physiological impact of another person's emotion. And that's this whole idea that we are not in an ecosystem of ourselves. We are in an ecosystem connected to everything.
Exactly.
Oh, so do you want me to go back to the stones?
Please do.
Okay. So I'm experiencing these supernatural experiences with my son. Now that you can appreciate that, right?
It's so incredible.
I know. And but I was still so traumatized by all the decades of trauma. I couldn't actually experience the joy, right? And I wanted to. I knew that was the appropriate emotion, but I was so hindered and essentially just pressed down, literally, emotionally, that I couldn't feel it. And I knew I needed help, but I knew a psychologist was going to be the worst thing in the world. And I knew I needed some other modality, right? That was actually going to address whatever was on me, physically pressing my emotions down. I didn't want a drug. I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted somebody to get this darkness off of me quickly. And so I went to get some energy healing done. And this was very hard for me because this is not something that, fit in my, traditional evangelical Christian type of, practice, right? But I also had experienced enough to know that we have a spirit and emotions are energy. So these can actually get trapped on us. So I knew there was something to this, that essentially you've got to create an environment where this stuff can leave, right? It can exit. And, if you look back at all the Native American practices and stuff where they use drums, right? And this is, again, the vibration, getting the emotions to leave. They don't have to stay. We don't have to make it home for them. They can go.
Yeah.
That's
and do you think
healthier.
They get, like you said, memories in muscle earlier? Because this whole thing about bad emotions being trapped in muscles.
Well, if you think about it, sensory, so the sensory synapses and the motor, right? These are all supposed to be interconnected. And so we're taking in the sensory and moving our bodies, right? This is all, and these create, actually, the interesting thing about emotion is emotions, the actual vibrational frequencies are produced by the organs.
Right.
And so that's another kind of aspect of this. So this affects the DNA and it affects the cells on a cellular level. It affects the frequencies at which they're, vibrating. And so again, if you're not processing and releasing these, negative emotions, they sit with you. They just stay there. Oh, also interesting thing about memory, how when people have organ transplants, they'll have the memories and
I've heard this. Yeah, I've heard this.
Yeah. And so there's something to this whole memory fields. But again, this is something for scientists to figure out, not single mom.
Right.
This is not my...
You've taken it far enough. We'll take it from here. Yeah, that's it.
I've given you an idea. Go with it.
Yeah, go with it. Okay, stones.
So stones. So I go to this my friend, and she's a Christian believer, and she actually understood about energy, and so she was doing this energetic work. And when we were done with our second session, she handed me this little bag, and she's like, "I got these stones for you. I've prayed this prayer out of the Book of Acts over them." She's like, I'm like, and I take them. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with these? And the way I describe it in our story is, I took them like you would take a joint at a party. I was supposed to be grateful, but I didn't know what to do with it.
Thank you very much.
So I was like, okay. And I brought them home. And again, I didn't know what to do. And she said, just look them up, whatever you feel is right for you. Again, feeling, right? The feel, what feels right. Going back to that intuition that our spirit actually has knowledge and knows what it needs, right? So I took them out of the little bag and I put them beside me and I'm looking them up on my phone. I have my bedroom door closed and my bathroom door closed, and Houston was in the whole other part of the house. I'm looking them up on my phone and I hear boom, and it's my bedroom door. Then boom, and it's my bathroom door. And he's standing there and he's like, stones, stones, stones. And he won't stop shouting until finally I was like, here, take them. I didn't know what to do. And so he takes them to his room and he lines them up right next to his bed, and he gets as close to his bedside table as he can. And that's where he was. And so I went in there and I said, what's going on with the stones here? Like, what are you doing? And he said, he sat straight up and he said, when you're autistic, you're a magnet for all energy, good and bad. These stones have good energy. Remember, she had prayed the prayer out of Acts over them. And I was, and I'm like, I'm clueless, right? And I was like, then I'm asking him about energy. Well, where's their bad energy? And he starts naming all the things that have bad energy, right? And there's just this whole idea that like spirit affects matter, right? Energy affects matter. And so he starts naming all these things that have this bad energy in our home. I'm like, oh, and it was a lot, right?
Really?
So I start getting rid of everything. And in that process, there was this one necklace I had that had these clear beads on it, and the chain had broken. And I had put the whole thing in a bag to like ask my daughter to restring it for me. And he kept going to take the bag. And I'm like, what is he doing? Stop, leave that there. Well, there was one bead that I had missed, and it was lying on the counter. And because it was clear, I didn't notice it. Well, I went back to his room later, and that one little bead is sitting right by the other stones. Okay. And I asked him, I said, what is this? And I said, how do you even know if that's a stone? That could be plastic or glass or something. And he was like emphatic, and he goes, not only is it a stone, it's the bossy stone. And I went, the bossy stone. Let me look this up. So I went through and I'm like, and I find it, and it's clear quartz. Do you know what the actual electromagnetic properties of this stone are? It magnifies the properties of any stone around it, the bossy stone.
Really?
Yes. And so that's why I was like, okay, this isn't something he read. This isn't something he heard. This is something he can actually feel and see. He can actually experience it. My son found this whenever this whole thing about stones started happening. He's like, Mom, there's this big white rock out in the woods. Should I bring it? I'm like, sure. I mean, okay. He brings it in. We walk in the house, and Houston like almost stops dead in his tracks. And I said, what is it? And he said, he said, it's pushing the other energies. And so I went and I looked, and it's quartz, so like a big giant piece of white quartz. And what white quartz does is it conducts energy. It is a great conductor of energy, which pushing the other. And if you think about a musician, I mean, like a conductor, right? He's pushing the other energies.
He's orchestrating it.
Yes.
Wow.
And that's when I just started realizing that, like, that was the very beginning of me realizing that everything is energy. Everything's a frequency. Everything. We are frequencies. Everything around us is frequency. The 96% of energy that we actually can't physically perceive with our senses is also energy, and it's transmitting information constantly. So that's why when people are like so like attached to materialism, I'm like, why would you be attached to only 4%? You
probably have trouble convincing them that there's a gas flying around us that we breathe, like, because they can't see it, it's like, so some scientist has got to tell them, oh yeah, it's there. And then they go, we've got
right.
reason to believe in it.
We've somehow abdicated our right to think for ourselves, and we're only allowed to think things that experts tell us are true.
Well, that's one of the big things that needs to change, isn't it? We've become reliant on experts to tell us everything, and it's taken away our intuition,
Yes.
even on diet, you'll read a fad diet and it will say, oh, eat 30 plants a week to get a good gut microbiome. You start eating them and you go, I don't feel too good, And then rather than sort of say, well, perhaps I should stop eating these 30 plants because, I'm bloated and I've got all these problems. No, but the expert said that I should eat them, right? So
Right.
I just got to keep persevering and get through fight. This is the wrong thing, isn't it? On so many levels with reliance on them.
Well, and I think that,
experts.
I can think for myself. And
Exactly.
if you in your walk need something, I can respect that you on your walk need something different than me and what I need.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
Exactly. And that's it. One size does not fit all.
Right.
And like we said earlier when we were talking about Rick Rubin and the creative thing, what might be my creative process is completely different to somebody else's, but we both arrive at a thing where we create something that's new and it might be of benefit to the world. That's where ideas come through us so that we can do something with those ideas and make the world better for people.
Well, and the whole thing about ideas is these are these gifts that God gives us to give the world. These are
exactly.
And that he even wants to use us to be a part of this process. And it's just incredible. And, it used to be like with, it's really sad what Bill Gates did, but, it used to be when they were creating all these, information systems, right? That it was this collaborative process where everyone, like one person would build something and the next person would take what that person built and built on top of that. And they were creating this whole collective, knowledge that was, it was all based on this premise that information should be accessible to everyone.
Yes.
That it wasn't.
Yeah, open source.
Exactly. Everyone had access to it. So whenever Bill Gates took it all, which was their collective work,
right,
and monetized it and copyrighted it and claimed it as his, that was a great offense. But it also it's very much like our, corporate model and system and our educational institution, which says, no, we own the knowledge. We will grant you access, permission to attend our university where we will give you a grade depending on, it's just as if the knowledge belongs to them. It's silly.
They call it a university, And they even wear the square, the square and the circle, the mortarboard, right? The square over the circle, when they graduate. So even the symbolism of the square and the circle in that, which is another thing. But
I never thought about that. That's amazing. That's a really good point.
The mortarboard is the square over the circle, material reality over the infinite. Isn't that amazing?
It is.
So electromagnetism. Okay, so we can't see the field that's between fish that make them all turn left and right in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
We can't see the field that's between birds when they turn left and right. There's some sort of field around them. Mm-hmm. It's clear, isn't it, that Houston's got a different. We know there's a spectrum of electromagnetism. We can't see gamma. We can't see X-ray.
Right.
But that we know that they exist because there's equipment that we've created that can detect these things now. But we can't see them. We don't have the tools with our eyes unless. Some people do, right? Some people do see these things. Some people, their eyes will see colours, or they'll see sounds or hear colours. So Houston's clearly just like, you could say, well, he's just got an ability to detect the electromagnetic spectrum different to us.
Mm-hmm.
What's the problem with that?
There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not sure.
I don't understand what their problem is. They just go, some of us are different. It's almost
I think it threatens. It threatens
exactly.
the institutions, and it threatens the way of doing things. It threatens a lot of people's money. It threatens a lot of people's letters behind their names. And that's, how they have their power and authority and their worth. And I would like to proposition this idea that Houston says that every single soul, one soul, is worth more than all the money in the entire world. One soul. And if we could get back to that's what we should be saving. Years and years ago, I did this one little talk, and it was terrifying, right? Because I was in front of this huge crowd, and here I am, this little mom, right? And this is before anything. This is before I knew this. I'm like trying to do my little part to stand up for what I think is right. And I remember I get up there, and I could barely speak. I'm like shaking, holding the microphone, and I said, God wants us to save people, not money.
And it's so, that's fantastic. It's hard, isn't it, to stand up in front of people? It really is. I know.
And I remember when I got down, and I'm still like shaking after I got down. I remember I had several people come up to me and go, "You know what? You're right. We're supposed to be saving people." Yeah, and we need money for the corporate. For the economic system that we're currently in. We
But it's
do
a game.
need it.
It's a thing that we invented. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's imaginary.
It
Money's imaginary. They
It
create it
totally
out of
is.
thin air.
Yeah.
Your government has been created hundreds of billions of dollars, ours as well, to send to the Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet, you say, well, you've got to pay your taxes. I go, well, if you can print money, why do we have to pay taxes, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these questions are coming up now.
Yes.
And I wanted to say this because we're at 2 hours, and
sorry, you're going to have to cut me somewhere. I don't know.
We'll have to cut. I'll have to trim some of the fat, but it's hard because this has been such a great chat.
Yeah.
What they're afraid of, to me, are losing the things that they feel certain about.
Yeah.
Certainty is the enemy. That's why I said earlier, if anybody says I've got all the answers, run.
Yeah.
It's certainty that makes people go to war with each other because they think they have the right answers.
I do think there's one thing we can be certain of, though, and that is that love is real.
Right.
And if we can just start with that, I think that's something that we can be certain of.
And I think that when we, to go back full circle to what I said when my teacher said every now and again it has to be cleaned up, it's just to bring it back to its grassroots of love again.
Yeah.
Community and caring and
absolutely
being kind to each other and having compassion and
isn't
knowing that we need to
fun.
It's been a journey. It's been a journey for me. I have to say, it's been a journey for me to get to these realizations. And even though I had the realizations about this some years ago, that doesn't do it just to know it.
It is with the heart.
It is with the heart.
So, okay, years ago, I was 5 years old and I got very, very sick. And I had to, this was back when if you got sick, you're like really sick like that, you go to the doctor in the middle of the night and they give you a shot and you're better, right? It really was like that. 1970 something, 78. That's forever. I know, sorry. So anyway, after I remember it was pitch black and my dad runs into the pharmacy and comes out with whatever they were, and he gotten me this big button. It was one of those big giant buttons, right? And it was Ziggy. Do you remember Ziggy? Like from forever ago. It was this character. Think like Snoopy, but kind of like that, right? The little character.
All right.
And it said, love is the answer. And Ziggy's sitting there with the little thought bubble and he goes, what was the question? And so remember, I'm 5. Okay, so give me a little bit of grace here. But you remember how they used to like print the answer to thing at like upside down on the bottom or on the back? And I remember like I searched all over that button for the answer. What was the question? I searched everywhere and I'm like, I don't understand. Why would they say that and not give me the answer? I was like, but now, of course, I'm like, no, that's it. Like love, it doesn't matter what the question is. Love is the answer. That is the answer. And Houston is so emphatic that he says, God is love and power. Like it's not an attribute. It's what he is, the source he is. And I will read this. This is what he says. Malevolence and love fight for us. That's what's going on inside us and around us. He gave me a task to tell what I've seen, to tell of his love, to be his herald. I'm without any doubt friends with Jesus. I don't want anyone to die not being his friend. Most importantly, hear this. Anything is possible if you believe. That's what he said. And the thing that got me was, here you have someone who's been trapped in his body, treated horrifically by the entire world, discounted, not given a voice, spoken to like he's, intellectually disabled, and yet he loved so intently. And when I asked why, he said, my love for God consumes me. And that's because he had seen it. it was that overwhelming.
Wow.
And
Katie, I think
whenever
that's,
you see that love, I don't think there's any room for anything else.
and by the look on your face, it's so clear to see that you not only have seen that, you felt it, haven't you?
Yeah.
You know, don't you?
Yeah.
Katie, I'm going to end it there because that's a great way to end it. We're at 2 hours, and
I'm so sorry.
I'm fairly
for going
sure.
on
I
so
don't
long.
usually. No, it's me as well. I mean, you've. I think I could easily go on for another couple of hours. Really, there's an energy to this conversation. But I don't want to put people off because sometimes when they see 2 hours, they go, "Oh no, it's too long. I haven't got the time to."
Yeah.
So, but I'd love to do this again sometime, and I'm
I'd love to too.
yeah, I've got some other people to interview, and I'm putting something together with all of this. So it'd be great to talk again.
love
It's been
it.
great to connect with you.
Thank you so much. And oh, and if you want to know like more of the details, by the way, that's the book right there.
Thank you. And okay, now, is there a link that you can give me for that to put on to the
Sure.
description below in YouTube? Yeah, that's on Amazon, so
Yeah.
that we can. Fantastic.
And it's on Amazon, so yeah, it's super.
I'll find it on Amazon and put a link at the description below. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. It was
All right.
wonderful. All right, you have
For
a
me
great day,
too.
and we'll just
Yeah.
hang out, right?
Yeah, absolutely.